what a beautiful feast day. I love October 1st because it's the feast day of Saint Thérèse, the little flower. And there's so much we can learn from her spirituality, from her understanding of God, Adam. And I would love to unpack this together as we celebrate this incredible doctor of the church. There's so much to say about this great saint. I know we're not going to be able to do it in less than 30 minutes, but I'll tell you what, if we can just start to share about her impact that she left on the world, maybe others will be drawn into her story and really can extract things that can help them in their spiritual life.
Mm-hmm. Well, Deb, so first things, like, saints provide not only like a model for us, different types of saints, different types of lives that saints have lived, provide different examples of a holy life. And they provide a goal. And they have different charisms. They have different gifts. And they live different styles of their spiritual life, of their religious life. Thérèse is one of the most popular saints in the world. She's right up there with Padre Pio and Mother Teresa in terms of how many people immediately recognize her name. So for those that might not know much about her, so Saint Thérèse was a French Carmelite nun, so cloistered Carmelite nun. She entered the Carmelite order in 1888. You want to guess how old she was? I bet you know. 15. Mm-hmm. Now, a number of her sisters were already in the Carmel, were already nuns. Her parents were extremely pious, extremely holy people. They have been declared saints also. She had 9 years in the Carmel, during which time she wrote some which has survived for us, including the most famous book, A Story of a Soul. Mm-hmm. In the last 18 months of her life, she suffered terribly. She did have the long, dark night of the soul, which is a very specific thing. It's not depression. It's when somebody feels an absence of God. They don't feel the consolation of God's presence, and they have doubts. She experienced that in the last months of her life. She died at 24 of tuberculosis. So she died, kind of really struggling and struggling to breathe. It probably was not and there's no, I suppose, good way to die, but she suffered. And there's accounts of all of this that have, of course, survived. A lot of the other nuns kept notes on things that she said and kept diaries of everything that happened related to her, because even at the time, she wasn't well known. She was a Carmelite nun, invisible to the world.
Right. She stayed in the same place for her whole entire life, and it's amazing how the story of a soul went all over the world in many different languages.
Yeah. Now, to go back briefly, she entered at age 15. That is unusually early. And she pestered the church, harangued, begged the church, including the Pope at the time, for a special permission to enter at such a young age.
Right.
And it was granted. Her spirituality was extremely simple. So she is, called the Little Flower, or Little Thérèse in French. She's also associated with the Holy Face. She had a big devotion to the Holy Face of Jesus as seen in the Shroud of Turin. And she was canonized after only 28 years, which is very fast. The church often takes 100 years, sometimes 200 or more, before declaring somebody a saint. She was declared a saint only 28 years after she died. Mm-hmm. And as you mentioned at the opening, Deb, she was declared a doctor of the church in 1997 by John Paul II. Now, doctor of the church is a big deal. There's not a ton of people that are declared doctors of the church.
Right, and she was the youngest to receive the honor.
Mm-hmm. My understanding, Deb, tell me what your understanding of doctor of the church is. It's kind of somebody who's made such monumental contributions.
Impact, yeah.
To the church's theology and understanding of spirituality.
Absolutely.
Right?
Well said. That's what we learned when I was taking classes in theology. for my graduate degree, that's exactly right. Talking about doctors of the church having such a profound impact on the church and the way we understand things as Catholics through the years, through the centuries, depending on when that particular holy man or woman lived. But she's only one of 4, I believe, doctors of the church. Is that correct?
I'm not sure. I'd have to check.
Yeah, I believe she's only one of 4, and she's the youngest. Yeah. But her impact, the story of a soul, the little way, because it went all over the world, because it talked about these simple acts, these daily acts of charity and faithfulness and love and everything we can do, pleasing to God with full trust in God, had such an incredible impact on the worldwide church that it doesn't surprise me that this very young, powerful saint was elevated by John Paul II because of how she was able to pierce through with this understanding from her autobiography, the story of a soul, this understanding on how to walk in holiness, how to live in holiness. That's what we're all called to do. So you talk about leaving an impact on the church body. Well, of course, because it's the recipe, it's the blueprint on how to move in holiness towards sainthood and get back to God. It's people want to sometimes write her off, sometimes saying, and it's too simple. No, she was so direct, and her connection, like you said, the devotion to the Holy Face, her connection, she had just an intense connection to her guardian angel. I mean, she knew how to get there, and she did it in such a short amount of time. She lived a very, 24 years? I mean, it reminds me so much of Carlo Acutis, 15 years, and all these other very young saints who left this world with leaving an impact that we are forever going to go back to. People go back to a story of a soul over and over and over again. It never ends. The same with St. Teresa of Avila and the other female doctors of the church.
Yeah, and her spirituality was so accessible. It's not a kind of very complex, difficult thing to understand. She thought of herself as a tiny child before Jesus, a very little. She thought of herself as being very little, and didn't think of herself as being important. She just wanted to do whatever Jesus wanted to do with her life. There's a couple things spiritually about her, and I was thinking, Deb, I think you were thinking of, there's been 4 female doctors of the church.
Yes, that's what I meant. Yeah. She's one of 4 female doctors.
Female, yeah.
Yeah, I'm only talking the female.
Oh, okay.
I wasn't talking the St. Thomas Aquinas, and I wasn't. Yeah, no. I was talking about the female. So you're talking about to be elevated to that level when there's only 4 in our church history is amazing.
Yeah. Now, she loved the idea of being a priest. She longed to be not only a priest, but a missionary priest. She wanted to go and tell people about Jesus that had never been exposed to the gospel. And she bemoaned the fact that being a woman, she couldn't do that. This was in her diaries and her letters. And, Deb, I've heard this from other priests, and now I've been around long enough and met enough priests to realize it's really true. So many priests credit their vocation to Thérèse. It's shocking.
I couldn't agree with you more, Adam. My pastor that I worked for 6 years, he was so close to her. He was, and he credits her for everything leading into his priesthood, and for his priesthood being so well grounded and holy in his vocation. I totally agree with you. Similar to the Blessed Mother, those priests that are very devoted to the Blessed Mother, they have a very, very beautiful vocation story and their priesthood journey. But Thérèse has that same impact on priests.
Mm-hmm. And, let me just share a personal moment. I was visiting a young priest friend who was pretty new at the time in his priesthood, and the pastor of that parish, very nice guy, clearly older. And the young priest really liked Thérèse. And I had brought with me a relic that I had, which was a piece of her habit, mounted in a tekka. And I didn't know that the pastor had experienced, Thérèse as being the source of his vocation, meaning like something about her inspired him, or just spiritually, somehow she inspired him. God used her is the more clear way to say that, right? It's God calling the person, but we get inspired by the saints, and God uses the saints as intermediaries of grace sometimes for us, right? Like we ask them to pray for us and more grace comes. Anyway, I mentioned, hey, Father, I've got a relic of Thérèse with me. Did you want to see it? And he's at the kitchen table, and he looked at me kind of just silently, just staring at me. And I'm like, oh, did I say something wrong? And he said, yes, I would. And it's like his whole demeanor changed. Mm-hmm. And I handed it to him and left to go talk to my young priest friend to give him some time alone with the relic. And I came back in after about 20 minutes of chatting, and he was quietly crying at the table. Not sad, but just holding that and looking and crying. He had been reflecting. Yeah. Right.
Deep love and admiration for Saint Thérèse. Yeah.
So
he felt so close to her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wow.
Very powerful saint.
Yeah, this is amazing. No. I just want to make sure I didn't give you a false number. There's many more men doctors of the church than we have women. There's only 4, and she's one of them, and that's huge. But that goes to show you, for people that are listening, a lot of people say, where's a woman's role, or woman's place in the church history? And there you go. You've got 4 doctors of the church, and Saint Thérèse is one of them. So. Female ones. She is a doctor of the church at such a young age. She died at 24, and she left a worldwide impact on the church, and even people from other faiths just love her. She's. I agree with you, Adam. She's right up there with all the other wonderful, very popular saints like Padre Pio and Mother Teresa. And I'm so grateful to John Paul too, that he elevated her to that designation, that honoring of being a doctor of the church. But going back to this, Adam, I just wanted to just kind of fun facts, or facts that that maybe people would find interesting. Given that she's the youngest of all the female doctors of the church, people may say, well, why her, when she had such a simple understanding, but direct, powerful, and unwavering understanding of connection with God, and being on the road to holiness. And wouldn't you say that the autobiography of A Story of a Soul, because it had such an incredible depth to it, even through its reading simplicity, it had this unbelievable indication or golden nugget, if you will, of understanding never to be attached to the outcome. One of the things, there's a couple things with The Story of a Soul that people said, well, when they looked at it from all different angles and tried to pull it apart and say, well, why did this rise to a level where she would be elevated to be a doctor of the church? It's so powerful when you understand it completely, her story, and how she chose to trust over an attachment, a personal attachment to the control and outcome of things. I mean, Adam, think about that. That is huge in this world, where this world is constantly manipulating things, and people are controlling, and people are being their own little mini gods, and people are trying to get information that they shouldn't have about the future, and all sorts of things to try and predict or control or orchestrate the future. She chose the exact opposite: extreme faith in God, a method of holiness, step by step, in everything you do in the ordinary life, with no attachment to the outcome. That is so radically different than what the world is telling us to do.
Yeah, and my recollection is that she also didn't try to manipulate situations and people to make them like her or give her approval. Like
Precisely.
she didn't like put on a fake anything to try to get others to think that, whatever, so, to manipulate them essentially. So she wasn't looking for the outcome of like being honored. I remember little anecdotes of people having a misunderstanding that, she was at fault for something and kind of being, blamed for making a mistake when it actually was a different nun, but she would, of course, not correct them, right? Because she didn't have any problem with that. Even though it was a mistake, she wasn't seeking to be elevated.
Right.
She was
and there were a lot that were jealous of her. She had a lot of issues with people, not they didn't care for her or didn't understand her. She had a lot of issues, which pained her, but it didn't stop her from staying who she was, which is beautiful. Mm-hmm. It could really change people, right? You're in a convent, you're in a monastery, you're in a place that is cloistered, away from the rest of the world, and then you have this going on inside where you should have a family environment or a safe environment, and she didn't even really have that because there were a lot of disruptions.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's a challenge to live in a cloistered convent or monastery for sure. So, if I can share in the minutes that we have left, Deb, just on a personal level. So I've shared this before, but it's just a neat story, and it's the neatest experience I ever had with a relic, and it was Thérèse. Just as an example of, I don't know what this was, maybe you can help me with it, but we used to go to a particular Carmel near where a monk friend would do exorcisms every week, and on the usual days that we would pray, we would go out for benediction. So there would be adoration and benediction. And we would go there before starting, the exorcisms for that evening and then be doing that. And this was a rough case, so, doing that for 4 or 5 more hours. So we had this habit. So it was January. It was cold and very dry. But it's a stone floor in the chapel, and they have the grate there, so they have the part the public can be in. And afterwards, they would always bring out this first-class relic of Thérèse, which was a sizable bone mounted in a teca. And as people filed out, the priest would be holding it, and people could venerate the relic. So you kind of approach, towards the altar, kiss the relic, turn to your left, and file your way out down the left side of the tiny little chapel. So there's no carpet, to build up static electricity. And I go up, and I had done this before, we had done this a number of times, and I go up, and as I'm leaning forward to kiss the relic, I didn't quite reach it, I didn't quite feel the contact with it, and I felt as if you had been walking across a carpet in winter and you touched a doorknob and got zapped. Mm-hmm. That, but I would say stronger, where my lips were getting close to the relic. I felt that zzz. Yeah. And I blacked out for a quarter second. Oh. So I felt that, and I kind of came to, leaning to the left just a little bit, and and got myself straightened out. And Father's looking at me kind of like, "Are you okay?" And I turned to the left, went down and sat in a pew and prayed. And I'm like, "What was that?" And so I talked with my monk friend about it, and he said, "Oh, maybe you should write Mother and see what she thinks." And so I wrote a letter to the mother of the convent there, and she wrote back, and she said, "There's been many such experiences with relics of Thérèse as the relics have toured the country. This is nothing to be concerned about. This is a gift from the saint." And she included a third-class relic that Mother had made herself with some cloth, touching it to the first-class relic in her letter back to me, which was very sweet. And I've always thought about that. That was about 20 years ago, and it was a unusual experience. It was really cool.
Well, and yeah, that is incredibly cool. But I will tell you that it's interesting you said that, because when I visited the relics at a church many years ago of Saint Thérèse, it's funny you said that, because I would equate it to a sense of electricity, because you could absolutely feel like there was almost like an electrical current, because as people were walking up and getting ready to venerate the relic, they could feel it, and you actually got that spark of almost like a static electricity type thing. I personally, that's in my humble opinion, it's just I, like the sister said, the mother said, it's a gift from God, but I just for me, it's just a confirmation how alive they are, how active they are, and how much they care. And I just think it's their way of sending out the signal that it's real. It's not just, you're not just going up and kissing a bone fragment of a saint. It's alive, meaning it's so active. For all of us on the other side of the veil and helping us and ministering to us here. I just find that to be just a sense of being very, very present to us. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. So real quickly, Adam, I know because I kind of got off on a little bit of a tangent about the female doctors of the church, only because I'm a female and I just love this about our church. Mm-hmm. But just for fun facts for everybody, 4 female doctors of the church: Saint Teresa of Avila, Saint Catherine of Siena, Saint Thérèse, and Saint Hildegard. So she's one of the top 4, and she's very powerful. So females do matter in our church.
Absolutely.
Thank you for listening to The Next Right Thing with angel specialist Debbie Georgiani and religious demonologist Adam Bly. Debbie and Adam are daily contributors to the live radio program Morning Joy, hosted by Keith Downey every weekday on the Guadalupe Radio Network. For more authentic Catholic content, go to grnonline.com/joy.